Hello and welcome to Meeting People with me, Amal Pandya. Meeting People is a podcast where I have long conversations with rebellious, adventurous and sometimes courteous free spirits. Mr. Cornell, welcome to the Meeting People podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for sparing the time. Now you've probably noticed around us that there's this sort of declinist narrative that's sort of taken hold of Britain somewhat. People calling it decline porn, where everything's going to shit and there's no spirit left. And I just thought it would be worth getting in someone to talk us through the spirit of adventure a bit, particularly that kind of Homeric age from 100 years ago with the Antarctic exploration, something I know you're deeply passionate about. So would love to kind of spend the time talking about some of those heroes that kind of inspired you and also some of the stuff that you've done to kind of uplift people around you in that setting, if that's okay.
Sure, would love to talk about it.
So first off, what's you've got some heritage in this. What got you into the polar ice exploration side of things in your life?
Yeah, so the history is that my great-grandfather, my maternal grandfather, my mother's grandfather, went to the South Pole with Shackleton on his second expedition, his first as leader. That was the Nimrod expedition that left the UK in 1907. And it was a pioneering expedition in many ways because they were the first team to kind of break through and onto the polar plateau. And they got very close to the South Pole. They got within 97 nautical miles of the South Pole, having trekked something like 650 miles across the barren ice. And they turned back at 97. And Shackleton famously said that he would rather be a lame donkey than a dead lion.
Yeah.
And I think he was, I mean, there are a number of things about him that people remember and that differentiates him from some of the other well-known polar explorers. But I think ultimately he was the sort of greatest leader of men in challenging circumstances. And that is one example of that. He realised that there was no point being the first to the South Pole if you can't get home. And so they turned round, the four of them, and they reversed their footsteps for another 600 miles or 650 miles. Maybe more, actually. Maybe it's 900.
They did sort of between 600 and 100 miles one way, had 97 left to go and had to go back. I mean, it must be quite a decision.
A huge decision. And I think of course Scott did the opposite, right? But because, I mean, of course he got to the South Pole, albeit second, but never got back. And because I think he put people have different views, but I think he may have put the glory of getting to the South Pole ahead of the value of protecting the lives of his men. Yeah. And of course, the heroic age of polar exploration is quite interesting, isn't it? Because a bit like that time, was it dulcet decorum est pro patria mori, it's nonsense, right? Yeah. And I think those two parallels, so Shackleton was different from that. So my great-grandfather was part of the four that turned round. He was the second in command of the expedition. And as growing up as a child, I was just always fascinated by those exploits. And would your dad or your mum be telling you these stories as a kid, and you'd be kind of funny enough, it wasn't the case. My Jameson Adams, he was called, was famously reluctant to talk about his time in Antarctica. Yeah. At the funeral of one famous explorer, I can't remember which one, I think some Bishop of London or someone asked him what it was like to be at the South Pole with Shackleton, and he said, that was my brother, that wasn't me.
Oh wow, just didn't want to go there.
Didn't want to go there. for other reasons, which maybe we'll touch on. But so my mother didn't know that much about it. What prompted my interest, I think, was just the fascination of Antarctica itself, and then understanding that I had this real connection. Kind of, just feeds that fascination, and I'd always wanted to go down there, and that opportunity arose later on.
Well, this gives me I want to go into Shackleton and those expeditions and his leadership skills, as well as the other characters involved a bit later on. But it gives us a good segue to sort of shoehorn Elon Musk in, as ever. And Jeff Bezos. Obviously they're both kind of space, investing a lot of money into kind of space exploration and deciding what the next thing for humanity is. And Elon's thing is we've got to get to Mars, and Jeff Bezos' thing is that's a stupid idea. We need to be living on colonies that we create in space. And his analogy as to why Mars was a terrible idea is like, if you think we could live on Mars, spend some time in Antarctica. Mars is kind of 1,000 times worse. So could you just give us a sense, what is Antarctica? What is this continent that you don't really get a sense of it looking at it on a map, because you're looking at it from the wrong angle, right? You've got to be looking at it from the bottom up rather than at the Greenwich Mean Time. So can you just tell us about that continent? Why did it pull people towards it when there's not much beach activity to do there, is there? Or not the kind of beach activity?
There is beach activity, I guess, but frozen beach. Antarctica is a continent, landmass. Not many people know that the South Pole is at 10,000 feet. So you always think it's kind of probably, at sea level. Yeah. But it's not. It's 10,000 feet, and it doesn't snow in Antarctica.
Right.
So it's like a desert. It's like a white desert. Vast, huge. I mean, I can't remember exactly how big it is, but Australia plus kind of thing. And around the seashore, there's life, because there's penguins and
seals, which we'll come on to.
Yes, exactly. That kind of fantastic natural sea life, but bird life. But once you get into the interior, there's nothing there at all. Absolutely nothing. No plants, no birds, no animals, no nothing. And it's dark for 24 hours a day for 9 months of the year, and light for 24 hours a day 3 months of the year, or 4 months of the year, and there's nothing in between. And it's extraordinarily restorative, actually, because you think you're going to get bored. What am I going to do, or how am I going to keep myself occupied, or whatever? But actually, your brain empties of all the things that you're worrying about, or you're concerned about, and you just concentrate on surviving. And that's a really wonderful.
It's literally one foot in front of the other.
It's right. One foot in front of the other, and it's kind of administering yourself to make sure you don't kind of slip up. We were trained by a fabulous lady called Mattie McNair, who was the first woman to reach the South Pole, I think. First all women's team she led. And she was like, you sweat, you die. Because once you sweat, the ice freezes on the inside of your warm clothing or against your skin, and there you have this kind of ice bag on your chest. So you have to manage yourself, and that takes a lot of time. Just getting out of the tent in the morning and getting fed, and it can take 3 hours. So
all the things that annoying colleague told you, or the kind of crap about what a politician has said, or it just melts away,
empties away, and you're with you're
worrying about yourself and your team,
and you have a lot of fun too, because you're in the tent for 2 or 3 hours, and at the end of the day, you've got to amuse yourselves and writing your diaries or cooking your food or just kind of looking after yourselves. It's great. It's really healthy stuff.
Yeah, I remember years ago, as you'll remember, I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, which is nothing compared to going to the South Pole, but you kindly lent me your kit. And the team that I was with, my mates, kind of took the piss out of me because I had all this polar exploration gear for what was something that... And one of my friends ended up having a kind of thermal attack, hypothermic attack after the summit. and it was your kit that I wrapped him in, and he was shivering away. And like we put him in that big coat, the sleeping bag, rubbed him up and down, just got him, and it automatically heated him up. So like they kind of like, I felt quite smug after having the piss taken out of me from the start of the.
It's true, right? Yeah. I mean, it's fabulous. It was amazing. Timberland will be very pleased about that. They were our kit sponsors, and they did an amazing job. Actually, it'll make you laugh that one of my polar colleagues, when we flew down to Argentina, he had an excess baggage bill of like £500, so he just put all his Antarctic kit on and got onto the plane. To save money. Got onto the plane wearing every bit of clothing he had in his bag, which made him look.
All right. Well, let's talk more about it then. You decided to go, I guess, to scratch an itch and follow the fascination you had as a kid, and also for charitable, causes as well. I remember you telling me you had to smuggle chorizo into Argentina.
A little bit of that going on.
Because that's the kind of best food. So just when did you decide to go? What was it in aid of, and how was it?
Okay, so the opportunity arose because a great grandson of Emily Dorman, who was married to Ernest Shackleton, Will Gow, decided that he wanted to recreate the Nimrod expedition.
So that's the second one that your great-granddad was on.
Exactly, the 1907 expedition. And he wanted to try and find the great-grandchildren of those 4 explorers and persuade those 4 to recreate the journey, with the intention of being at the 97-mile point, which is it's just a point on the compass in the middle of nowhere. Exactly 100 years to the day that Shackleton took that decision not to be a dead lion, on the 9th of January 2009, and then to complete the 97 miles of what we called unfinished business. So Will Gow, through Ernest Shackleton's granddaughter, got in touch with me, and we were able to cobble together 3 of the 4 great-grandchildren. And then Eric Marshall's, we couldn't find a relation to Eric Marshall. Frank Wilde's great-grandson, James Adams' great-grandson, Ernest Shackleton's wife's great-grandson, and then 1 or 2 other tag-alongs. That's a bit, we put that trip together, and we set up a charity called the Shackleton Foundation, which was the fundraising vehicle which we raised money for, and which is still going, actually, which we can maybe talk about later on. So that was the genesis of the trip. And we got there. We got to the 97-mile point, exactly 100 years to the day, and then we were able to close the gap and do the bit that they hadn't done 100 years before. Yeah.
What was the preparation like? Did you have to train? Did you have to, or did you want to be as pure? Were you smoking cigarettes every day like they did? Did you have the same? How pure were you to the original?
So I have to put my hand up here and say that we did it in 2 teams.
Yeah.
So there was a team of 3 that recreated the whole expedition, and that was the longest unsupported expedition across Antarctica. And they set off from Shackleton's base camp, the Nimrod hut, in late November, and then a smaller team, the 97-mile team, which I led, flew into the point 97 miles from the pole, where we met those 3, Henry Worsley, Will Gow, and Henry Adams, and then they went their way to the South Pole, and we went our way to the South Pole. So we did train. I was on the ice for 11 days, so I mean, not very much really. Those guys were on the ice for 68 or 69 days. They had to train a lot harder than we did, and they had to go up the Beardmore Glacier, which is extremely, extremely challenging. For us, it was about dealing with the altitude sickness.
And the cold.
The cold. And you have these things called the katabatic winds that come off the surface of the polar plateau and straight into your face. So that's hard, and you're trying to do your miles. You're trying to do 10 to 12 miles a day. Basically, that's the target. And it is literally 1 foot in front of the other. We spend a lot of time pulling tractor tires around ploughed fields before we went. You're carrying a lot of weight with you. Of course, you can't be supported up there. It's very hard to be supported. You can't guarantee on getting any support because that's weather dependent and distance dependent and fuel dependent, all those other things. So you're carrying food and fuel and medical supplies with you. So you're carrying a lot of weight. You're pulling a sledge, and because you're so covered up, you can't really talk to anyone.
Yeah,
and you're just following.
How cold are we talking?
It varies. I mean, some days it was not much below freezing. Could be 5, 8. The wind makes a lot of difference.
Yeah.
So 5, 8 plus wind could be 20. 20 plus wind could be 40. It's brutal. It can be brutal actually, and you have to be really careful because if you one tiny slip and you're frostbitten your fingers or your nose or something, and then you start to sweat, and then you start so you really have to look after each other. That's another lovely thing about it. You are looking after each other, and you're working very closely together to get the tent up quickly, to get inside the tent, to get the tent down quickly, to pack it away. It's got to be very, very kind of methodical.
And in terms of sort of keeping yourselves together, and did you have moments when you were there where it was scenic and beautiful, and you captured a kind of time together, or was it literally just a complete slog?
We had some brilliant moments together, and it is the most inspiring landscape. You get these things called parhelions, which are a kind of when the sun, the rays of the sun capture the ice crystals in the air, and it creates this kind of almost godlike kind of cross in the sun's kind of shadow. And these parhelions are very inspiring. And when you're together and you're doing your miles and you're making your distance, it's wonderful, and you have time to think. And you don't stop very often. I mean, you might stop for a couple of minutes, change the lead, someone's with a compass at the front, you might eat something quickly just to get some energy inside you, and then on you again, because you don't want to stop for more than 2 or 3 minutes.
And what about sleep?
I found sleep really hard. It's quite interesting. I was exhausted at the end of there's no day, at the end of every session. I was exhausted. I was thinking, God, I'm just going to crash out now, get some food inside me, get into my sleeping bag.
You're in survival mode, so you're just wired.
A little bit, and also it's daylight.
Yeah, of
There's
course.
no darkness, so your circadian thing gets thrown for a bar of whatever, and I think the altitude also makes it hard. So you sort of lie in this bag and you kind of toss and turn, and you might get 3 hours or something, or 4 hours. But an 11-day thing, it's not going to make a big difference. But if you're doing 60 odd, it does eat into you, I think.
And on the flip side of the kind of most special moments you had and the kind of mental clarity it brought was also that kind of downside risk. You're 11 days away from loved ones, family, kids, and you said, you could have, if the wind, if one of you'd fallen ill or the weather changed, you wouldn't be beyond help, and there could have been a 6-hour window where you would have lost your life, or 3-hour window, whatever it is. And did you worry about that? Did that cross your mind?
I think
when you signed up
for Henry, Will, and Henry Adams, the ice team, the guys that did the full expedition, that was a real factor.
Yeah,
that's 100% part of their thinking. And there were long stretches of their journey where it was not possible for them to be rescued, and they would have had those thoughts constantly. In fact, I know they did. I think for us, we weren't tourists. I don't want to,
Well, you're being very humble about it, but at the same time,
I think they could, in a worst case scenario, we could have had a difficult time. Fact is, we didn't.
Yeah.
There were a couple of days when it was pretty miserable, and also it's quite strange. You lose any sense of perspective, so you can't actually tell whether you're going uphill or downhill when you're skiing. It's really strange, and the ice forms these things called sastrugi, which are like little ploughed field. It's like skiing across bumps the whole time, and you're pulling this heavy sledge. And your mind does play tricks with you. everyone knows when you're tired and you hallucinate and things can go strangely, and you have to keep close to each other, because if someone drops back, you can lose them in a whiteout.
Yes.
You can have a whiteout in minutes and you can't see anyone, and they could be 2 yards away from you. So you have to really be vigilant in that regard. And we were lucky like that. We didn't have too many of those issues. But
yeah. So let's talk a bit about. Actually, no. Very quickly, what did you eat as well? What was the? How did you keep your energy up?
So you boiled snow to melt into water, and from there you then boil pasta
in bags,
but you pre-prep everything. So every day's food will be bagged already. You'll have what we used to call a grab bag. So that would be chocolates, peanuts, raisins, jelly babies, all kind of smudged together in one little carrier bag that you stuff down the front of your smock, so it's close to your body so it doesn't freeze, because everything obviously freezes. So eating frozen Mars bars hard. Yeah. So you've always got that. So you're always topping up on that, and a water bottle that's close to your body as well, so that doesn't freeze because everything else freezes. Yeah. And then when you're in the tent, you'll pull out the evening meal, which would have been pre-prepped. Someone will volunteer to cook it, or be their turn to cook it, and they dish it out, and then you scran with a spoon and a plastic bowl, and the food has to be kind of divided up equally, very kind of methodically. No one wants to be the one that feels like they've been shortened one pasta tube or something. So it's all quite meticulous.
There's that story in the literature you sent me of how they had to share a spoon, where they were going and Shackleton would always make sure his spoon was smaller than the other guys, and anyway, it's just quite. That's
so true. Your brain, if you think someone's pulling a bit less weight than you on the sledge, or maybe getting a bit more food than you, or maybe doing less time, on the compass because you're breaking the trail, and that's a lot harder. Those kind of little petty things can flare up really quickly. Yeah. And I think Shackleton was brilliant at managing those kind of issues. I mean, they the diaries of these guys, they do reference it quite a lot, but I think he was the boss.
So let's go back 100 years then. Why were people wanting to, with much, not to take it away again, with less technology, less direction, because they do the maps and things like that, were less accurate maybe, better, less good equipment. What was driving people to want to kind of go somewhere where, as you say, there's nothing there?
So why did Mallory climb Everest? I think the answer was because it's there, wasn't it? Something like that. I think this is similar. This was the Edwardian age, heroic age of polar exploration. It was the peak of the British Empire. It was our destiny to be the first to the pole, right? Yeah. That was our right, as we saw it, and the fact we didn't make it was because I think we misjudged the extent of the challenge, and we assumed because we were British and we ran the world, we would by right be the first to get there, but we weren't. The Norwegians got there before us, but Shackleton was absolutely gripped by. I mean, he went down 4 times. In fact, he died on his final attempt to go down. And when when the pole was finally reached, he then set up an expedition to cross Antarctica, going through the pole. So that was the next thing. And then when that failed, he went down, and there was another mission to try and do something that. So I think he was a true adventurer. He was only really happy when he was in Antarctica. Yeah. And he was a restless soul. And I think when he was down there in command of his ship and in command of his men, with a big challenge on his hands, that was when he kind of felt he was at his peak, and he was. And he was an extraordinary, inspirational leader, and people put their trust and their lives in him, and he delivered. And
it was an inner struggle. I mean, Antarctica, it could have been something else in some ways, but like it was him against himself. Was that part of it? Do you think?
I don't know. I think he fancied fame and fortune.
Okay.
You know, he wanted the recognition. That drove him. He Irish by descent. His brother famously was locked up for trying to steal the Irish crown jewels. I think he wanted to be recognised by society.
Yeah.
And that plus his very steely determination. Romantic too. He's a poet. He read a lot of Browning. He wrote a lot of poetry. You know, he was a true sort of Edwardian hero.
Is the advert true?
No,
No,
I don't think it is.
But can we, if we were to pretend it was true, is it the sort of thing he would?
Yeah.
For people who I've got it written out, just for people who don't know it, there's a what's sadly probably an apocryphal advert that he put out before the.
I would think before the probably endurance expedition.
The endurance expedition in a newspaper, and it says men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honour and recognition in case of success. Ernest Shackleton. I mean, it does seem a bit backfitted, but does it encapsulate?
100% encapsulates. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think he was a wonderful judge of character. I think he could sense on first meeting someone that this would be an individual who would be able to cope with the pressures of being in Antarctica.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Scott might not have had that natural ability to judge character. I think he was more regimented, more strict, more kind of by the book, which doesn't work so well when you're under pressure.
So can we talk about the endurance expedition? Because that's the famous one, right? The boat journey.
The almost as famous as the Nimrod. I'm joking. Yeah. It is the famous one.
In terms of, again, it's that maybe classically British Dunkirk type spirit where you're turning a retreat or not a failure, but into something that is quite inspiring and heroic. This, it's 1914, was it? Just as the war broke out.
Just
Can you
the war
just
broke out.
give us a kind of, take as long as you need. Why is this an important
So I'll
part of our
try and
history?
put it into context for you. So following the Nimrod expedition, where they got close, but failed ultimately to get to the pole. Subsequent, following that, 1913, Roald Amundsen beat Scott in an expedition that Shackleton did not go on, although he had gone with Scott in 1903, Scott's first expedition. So the pole had been conquered. Shackleton still had unfinished business in Antarctica, and created something called the Trans-Antarctic Expedition, which was the idea was to cross Antarctica from east to west and go through the pole, and so he raised a team and a crew. He got some funding, which was always difficult for Shackleton. He was always short of money. The men were always promised their wages that never quite arrived, but that's another story. Anyway, he got together a crew. He took Frank Wilde with him. Frank Wilde went on every expedition led by Shackleton, and they famously set off just as war broke out in 1914. And Shackleton sent a telegram to the First Sea Lord on the news that war broke out, offering up the crew and the ship for the war effort. And you all know, Amel, because your history's good, that Winston Churchill was First Sea Lord at the breakout of First World War, and he just simply sent one word telegram back to Endurance: proceed.
Proceed.
So off they went, and I mean they were late, and the ice, the ship got stuck in the ice before they'd got to Antarctica, stuck firm in the ice.
So this was in the Weddell Sea.
In the Weddell Sea.
So they, which is just off the coast of Antarctica, and it was so cold that these ice, they're called ice floes, are they? And they kind of surrounded and crushed the ship.
FLOES, yeah. So you got an opportunity to get in before the ice around Antarctica freezes.
Yeah. And
once you're in, you then overwinter in Antarctica. You build yourself a hut. You practice your route marches. You lay out your food depots on the way to the pole. You prepare yourself for then a summer journey.
Right.
But you've got to get the ship's got to get in and out, because the ship can't overwinter there. So the ship drops the men and the supplies and then gets out, goes back to New Zealand, waits a year or 18 months or whatever it is for the journey to be completed, and then goes back and picks up.
That was the plan.
That was the plan. Endurance never got to the Antarctic coastline. And so the men, and this has happened before actually, earlier, late 19th century with the Belgian expedition, bizarrely. But so they were frozen in the ice, and they tried everything to shift the ship, and they couldn't shift the ship. And the ice flows as they move. They kind of create this enormous pressure, and the Endurance broke like a matchstick into thousands of pieces. Not thousands of pieces, but they had to kind of abandon ship, and they lived on the ice, which was gradually drifting northwards. And they had 3 lifeboats with them. One was called the James Caird. Dudley Docker was the second one. I forget the name of the third one. And they lived as a crew on the ice, best part of 8 or 9 months.
Just floating around, not
just moving,
where the water takes you, where the wind takes you.
Where the wind takes you, yeah, exactly. Living off seal meat and whatever rations they'd been able to take from the ship, and with their dogs. And you'd had to work out a plan. If no one knew where they were, there was no radio communication. No one, as far as everyone was concerned, they'd gone south, and they were expected back, 2 years later. As they got to the edge of the ice flow, as the ice started to melt and it became sea ice, that obviously they couldn't live on the ice any longer. And there were several occasions when Shackleton's men kind of wake up in the middle of the night and the ice had split between them, and one half of the tent was in the water and the other half of the tent. So there was a very dangerous, precarious.
And someone woke up in their sleeping bag in the water, and he had to basically pick them up and to rescue them.
Exactly right. Yeah, Tom Green. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was and also Shackleton had famously made everyone leave all their possessions behind on the ship. I think he rationed everyone to a certain amount of personal possessions in weight. I can't remember how much it was, a pound of weight or something like that. Famously, Eric Hussey was allowed to take his banjo with him because that was good for morale. They used to sing and play the banjo a lot. Anyway, the crew then decamped into three lifeboats.
Just before you did, was there also a story where he saw a copy of Browning poetry, and he threw some coins into the sea and said, "Oh, that's money well spent," and took his poetry with him as well. It's quite a nice poetic moment. Yeah,
that's exactly right.
Very Homeric.
Yeah, exactly. No, he was quite a theatrical. He liked to do things like that to kind of, wow the men. Yeah. And they relied on him and looked up to him, and they definitely believed he would get them out of trouble.
And is it one way of looking at it? His leadership skills were kind of the perfect marriage of maternal and paternal. He was very, I don't know if that's the right mental model, but nurture and kind of put a bloody shift in. The Scot was too stick, not enough carrot. And he was very good at spotting if someone was flagging and giving them extra hot milk, or taking the load off them onto himself. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. Yeah. But he was a disciplinarian too. I mean, there was a couple of times when a couple of the men, the ship's carpenter famously kept a cat that travelled down to Antarctica with them on the ship, I think against Shackleton's knowledge, probably stowaway. There was another stowaway. Percy Blackborough was a stowaway, lost a toe. But this cat, Chippy McNeish, Shackleton told him to kill the cat.
Yeah.
Get rid of it. We don't need it. And that nearly caused mutiny. And I think Shackleton made it very clear to Chippy McNeish that if he was going to break ranks and cause trouble amongst the crew, he would pay for it with his life.
Yeah, interesting.
So,
And then Chippy will come to he was selected, wasn't he? For that. So can we go to where did we get to? They realised they can't live on this ice floe anymore, and so they've got to. What happened next?
So what happened then? This famous boat journey where they aim for Elephant Island, which is a miserable outcrop of rocks, kind of maybe 600 or 700 miles south east of the Falkland Islands. It's a long way south, but along, maybe 300 or 400 miles north of Antarctica, kind of thing. They set their
in lifeboats, effectively.
In 3 lifeboats, they set their course to make it to Elephant Island, and Frank Worsley, who was the skipper of the Endurance, navigated, and the 3 boats were joined together with rope, and for some of the time, but some of the time they were separate. They kept together, and he navigated with his sextant by lying on his stomach on the front of the boat, with 2 men holding his feet to stop him falling in as he tried to get a read on the sextant from the stars in the sky, and they hit Elephant Island bang on. It's like a mile wide.
And you needed, the boat would rock up and down, and you needed a perfect, and then also a lot of the time there would be no stars. You're doing it once every 5 days,
exactly,
because it's clouded over, and it's a lot of guesswork involved. It was Dead Reckoning.
Dead Reckoning, that's right. And if had he been a mile to the east or a mile to the west, they would have missed the island altogether.
Yeah,
and that would have been that.
It.
So they got to the island, and then, having got there, that was the first time they'd been on dry land for, I can't remember, maybe a year. They'd been on dry land since, no, maybe more than that, actually. I mean, since they'd left New Zealand, in theory.
So this is 1916 now.
This is 1916. On to dry land, but the most inhospitable place on Earth, probably. And then what do you do? Because, no one comes to rescue you from there.
Yeah.
And no one knows you're there. And where do you go to next? I mean, you might be on dry land, but, what are you going to eat?
Yeah.
So, should we carry on?
Yeah.
So the next move was that Shackleton ordered that James Caird, the larger of the 3 lifeboats, to be made good for a journey to South Georgia, which was a long journey, again, through the Southern Ocean in an open boat. And he took 4 men with him, as far as I remember, one of whom was Chippy McNeish, because he took the carpenter because he knew he was a troublemaker, so he wanted him close to him. He didn't want him anywhere near the rest of the crew. Frank Wild was put in charge of the shore party, and they turned the other 2 lifeboats upside down, and they kind of lived under those 2 lifeboats, whilst Shackleton and Tom Crean and Frank Worsley and Chippy McNeish and I think one other made out for South Georgia in this extraordinary open boat crossing of the Southern Ocean, which I think 1 or 2 people may have tried to repeat subsequently, but that is kind of having just got to Elephant Island. And don't forget, they didn't have any food really.
And for context, this is kind of, the weather is horrific, the gales, the storms, and this is in a boat that's kind of barely above the surface.
Yeah.
And you're wet, constantly bailing out water every. And why did they choose that? That was the only. I mean, it was closer to go to the Falklands, but it wouldn't work if they went that way because.
No, South Georgia was closer, but that was the kind of achievable objective. And they had this little Primus stove that they kept in the bottom of the ship, at the bottom of the boat, that they'd like to kind of cook themselves some hoosh make themselves a warm drink, whatever it was. But it was, an open.
So that's their get to humanity, get a rescue, back to rescue and that was the short straw. The short straw wasn't being left on the island. It was getting in this boat and trying to go row and sail hundreds of miles.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, I forget the exact distance, but I think they were sort of maybe 11 days across the Southern Ocean, something like that. And when they got to South Georgia, they made it to South Georgia. The wind and the tides took them to a point of South Georgia where they were aiming for this whaling station, this permanently manned Norwegian whaling station, where Shackleton knew that they would find humanity. But they got to a point at South Georgia where they couldn't get to the whaling station because the boat wouldn't take them around, and they'd found shore, and they needed to cross cross South Georgia over the mountains.
And if they'd gone another day or so without coming to land, they probably would have. They were at the end of their tether.
They were
with that, because the boat was freezing, and they had to kind of. Some of it from the reading you sent me, like someone would have to climb out of the boat, be held on, and chip ice off it so it wouldn't roll around. And it was kind of probably you're permanently soaked. I think it was the other story was that their sleeping bags and their clothes were made of reindeer skin.
That's right.
And they're covered in soot the whole time. Their hands are like filthy from burning seal oil, which is their fuel and food. And in the hoosh that you mentioned, there'd be clumps of reindeer hair that would get into it. So they'd just get these filthy hands in, pick out the reindeer hair, squeeze out whatever porridge is in there just to not waste it, and then carry on eating it. It just sounds like proper hell.
Brutal.
11, and then like you don't know, you don't even know, and all to compound it, you don't even know if you're going the right way, whether you've missed
Survival
it.
instinct is huge, isn't it? And I think they had this obligation, they had this duty to the men that they left behind on Elephant Island to get them back there. So they climbed over South Georgia, which was a journey that I think the parachute regiment did at the start of the Falklands War. And they found with full kit and all they found that incredibly hard. These men did it almost in bare feet. I mean, the rags that they'd been living in for 2 years. The carpenter had nailed some nails into the bottom of the shoes, of the boots that they were wearing, to try and give them some grip. And they didn't really know where they were going. Yeah. They were kind of guessing. And anyway, they kind of made it to the whaling station. And famously, I mean, this is the first time they'd seen human life for 2 years or something like that. They banged on the door of the whaling station captain's office, and in Shackleton, when he said, "I'm Ernest Shackleton," they said, "No. He died. We haven't heard from him. He doesn't exist. He's gone," kind of thing. And he went, "No, I'm," and they didn't recognise.
Yeah.
And that was the extraordinary moment when they knew they'd survived. But then, of course, they had to go back to collect the.
I mean, he would have turned up a sorry mess, wouldn't he, with the three or four of them that would just been through the ringer.
Yeah.
Black to the face and yeah.
I mean, just kind of. No one could survive that, really. I don't think. So they had to go back to Elephant Island, and they had to find a ship to take them back and collect those men. And it took them 4 attempts and about another 6 months. The Chilean government eventually lent them a ship to take them in. And the first 3 times they went in, they couldn't get in because the ice was frozen around the island. So around Elephant Island. So it wasn't until the 4th attempt that they got in. And you can imagine what it was like for Shackleton. And he was fine, but he had all these. His
loyalty to his men was kind of paramount in his mind.
Exactly. So he eventually got back and they got into the island. And there's a wonderful picture of him arriving, and one of the men on the island sees him, and he lights a flare or something, and the first question is, are all the men alive? And the answer is that we're all alive. So he never lost a man in that whole expedition.
It was 28 men, was it?
I think so, yeah.
11 scientists as well, which kind of, they didn't quite know what they were signing up to.
Yeah.
But they all made it back. I mean, that gives you a sense of maybe how far we've come away from that time, the spirit of adventure, because, science as itself as an institution is kind of coming under a lot of criticism, and I think rightly so for many reasons. The corruption of it is akin to kind of corruption of organised religion in many ways. But like back then, scientists were going to the depths of hell to kind of learn and explore in the same way that explorers were. And the fact that he got them back home, and saved them was just amazing.
That's right.
Yeah.
And of course, in Scott's expedition, they found on the sledges and in the rucksacks of the dead men, a large amount of rock that had been carrying needlessly for scientific purposes to bring back. Had they been able to do an extra yard a day or an extra 2 yards a day, they would have made it to the depot that would have given them the food that would have, so science
came first.
Came first, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly with Scott.
And did it capture the national imagination when they got home? What was the kind of fallout, aftermath?
Hugely.
Yeah, it was a Dunkirk type moment.
Heroic failure,
Yeah.
but there wasn't a failure because, of course, everyone survived. But don't forget, they got back in 1917, and so the crew were all sent immediately to the front line.
Yeah.
I mean, within weeks, and not all of them survived that. So having survived this extraordinary expedition, within weeks they were at the front line and at the mercy of something else.
One of the first things they asked was who won the war, and it was only 2 years into
That's
the
right.
war. And I think there was a really sad moment where Shackleton's sold a piece of food to one of the crew member in exchange for a bottle of champagne in the pub in Hull that he was planning to open when he gets back from the expedition, and that the crew member kind of got killed in the war and never got to open his pub, sadly, and pay Shackleton back for the bit of food with a
Sounds about
and
right. Yeah.
It's kind of kind of humanity at its best and worst.
Yes, exactly.
And how do you, looking back kind of 100 years, how do you see that now? When you're looking at the world today with that lens, or through that lens, does it give you a different perspective?
It feels like there's a lot. It's not the age of innocence, is it? But there's something very natural and pure and kind of healthy about that kind of attitude. I mean, life seems a lot more complicated now.
Yeah.
I mean, for better or for worse, but something very inspiring about having noble ambitions and relying on your fellow men to help you through, or to achieve a common goal for the benefit of the country you love. I mean, maybe this sounds terribly romantic or very kind of rose-tinted glasses. I don't know, but it doesn't. It doesn't. Maybe the ambitions are all wrong now.
It's something very human about it. I mean, there was a story in a previous episode with Nigel McGilchrist, his classical historian. He talked about a Phoenician expedition that was sent by the Egyptians to go south from north of Egypt to Africa, and they disappeared. No one ever heard of them. There were records of them saying at one point the sun would point one way from the mast, and that's all of a sudden it went the other way, and they just kept going, and then ended up somewhere where people were speaking Phoenician again. And it transpired that they'd circumnavigated Africa, ended up in Carthage from Egypt, and they were like, oh, okay, that was the first, like, it's just very, I think we've been doing it. It's actually natural, and it's been taken away from us in many ways. There's a quote from, is this someone called Apsley Cherry Garrard? I don't know.
Apsley Cherry Garrard. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So I pulled a quote out from his something he said. He said, "Now we're living in an age which doesn't give a fig about the spirit, an age fatally compromised by ambition and worldly success." So maybe it contradicts what you said about Shackleton, did want some plaudits. He wasn't doing it just purely for philosophy's sake. But it does feel like we've quantified our success in terms of kind of money and likes and views and followers, and actually doing stuff is as important.
But I think you've got to be a bit careful, because absolutely, was a very privileged, wealthy individual who bought his way onto that expedition, and he was a very brave and heroic man, I'm sure. But he had he had the privilege of being able to say those things. I don't give a fig for this, I don't give a fig for that. But and so I think we've got to be a bit mindful of that generation's kind of daring do.
Yeah.
It didn't work for everyone at that, who was alive in those days.
No, sure. And you need the bandwidth to be able to have the opportunity to do it.
Yeah.
But they did do it, to be fair to them.
They did it. They came home and he went down again, after that for the next expedition.
So he got back and just couldn't sit still.
Couldn't sit still. Yeah, I don't think he settled. He wasn't comfortable in
2.4 children and
exactly. Yeah. So he went down again with Frank Wilde on an expedition in a ship called the Quest, and he had bad sciatica. Shackleton. He died of a heart attack, and is buried at South Georgia. Quite rightly, they left him there where he was where he was most happy. And of course, it was only a year ago that the ship, the Endurance, that sank in the Weddell Sea, was discovered, and a marine archaeologist called Medicine Bound considers it his greatest achievement to found the ship, and they found it bizarrely 100 years to the day that Shackleton was buried.
Oh wow!
At exactly the same time of day, they discovered
something in that fourth presence.
Exactly. Exactly. Go figure.
Yeah. Because they did feel like there was something with them when they were exploring, that kind of what they called a fourth presence. That someone sort of, you get to your kind of, without meaning to go all woo, but there's a sort of spiritual angle to the endeavour, which helps get you through, I imagine.
Big time. I think you know that's when you rely on
anything.
Anything. Yeah. But they no. I think they famously saw the footprints of a person, a figure that was travelling alongside them across South Georgia.
Yeah.
So they saw that, they felt that was a godlike presence who was on their shoulder, looking after them as they went over the top.
And the legacy today is obviously of kind of, as you said, cautious daring do, but kind of leadership, spirit of adventure. What is the state of the kind of explorers? There's lots of people doing it still. There's lots of inspirational kind of things happening. Is it Henry Worsley, who's a descendant of Frank? What? Could you talk about him a little bit?
Yes.
Frank was a navigator, wasn't he?
Frank was the captain of was the skipper of the Endurance, and then famously navigated the three lifeboats to Elephant Island, then subsequently the one boat to South Georgia. Henry led the expedition that I went on in 2009, and then subsequently did two more expeditions south. Shackleton was his hero in every sense of the word, and Henry is now buried next to Shackleton in South Georgia. He didn't come back from his final expedition, which he did on his own, so just about 10 years ago. So he's at peace, I think, in
doing what
he loved doing, and and is next to Shackleton in South Georgia. So there's some similarity there, I think.
And so, tell us about the Shackleton Foundation. Then that was the vehicle for your expedition, and what was it trying to achieve? Was it raising awareness? It's still
there, and so Thomas Pynchon, the American novelist, famously said, "Everyone has an Antarctic. What's yours?" And so the Shackleton expedition, the Shackleton Foundation, is there to support leaders in the mould of Ernest Shackleton who have an Antarctic and who need financial support to cross it. But importantly, it's to support early stage charities who need financial support to prove their concept works, or need financial support to generate some evidence of success in order to get further backing.
Right.
But importantly, it's about the individual who has this passion, this dream, this determination to deliver something for the benefit of the greater good.
Yeah. And it can be anything.
It can be anything, but it's about the leader showing the kind of determination and leadership skills of Shackleton, who has an Antarctic, who's determined to cross it, who needs support to achieve their goal. And so we funded a lot of early stage kind of venture capital style fundraising for early stage charities with strong inspirational leaders.
So what can we take away in terms of any other kind of tidbits from that expedition, from the subsequent ones, about his style of leadership that we haven't covered that you think is worth talking about?
I think Shackleton was in some ways a flawed character, and maybe a lot of leaders are flawed in some ways. I think although his men were supremely loyal and he got them out of a hole every time, he didn't necessarily pay them in the way that he'd promised them, or there was never quite the money there that was expected, and so I think Shackleton is it's a brand name that survived 100 years, hasn't it? It stands for something. Yeah. But there were aspects to him that weren't always perfect too. I think that's the thing to remember. Yeah, your heroes are never as ever. We're all human. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly that. Yeah. Well, hopefully people can, decide to explore more about this whole period, because it is fascinating. It's been really interesting for me to deep dive it. As you know, I like to wrap these things up with a closing question I ask all guests, which I call the long bet. You've got a 10-year time horizon to make a prediction of something you'd like to happen, or something you think will happen, or both. Preferably not world peace or kind of kindness, to be answers like to be discouraged. But would be nice, whether it's Shackleton related or not, something that you think, from your perspective, growing up with the tales that you had, you see happening directionally. So we kind of touched on this a bit in the conversation we've had today. My wish 10 years hence would be that social media begins to police itself in a way that is positive for society. I feel like comparisons have been made to, when alcohol, those paintings done by Hogarth of ladies kind of sozzle on gin, and on every corner of every street there was a pub, and alcohol destroyed a society, and it led to prohibition and abstinence and all those things. I think social media, is destroying us in some ways, and we've learnt to kind of manage alcohol some better than others, and not to let it control us in a way that it did, back then to some extent, hypocritically maybe. But I think social media, it's all well and good, the Australian government trying to impose social media bans on young children, but it needs to come from the young children, not from the government. And I think so that was what I would like to see in 10 years' time. So sort of a better understanding of the benefits and of the dangers, and that. So there are two more things. One is that would lead to children reading more.
Yeah,
I think for me, in 10 years' time, one of the big fallouts is that no one reads, or it's just fewer and fewer children read because they don't need to, because they can just flick through TikTok. And
well, the book medium has been under competitive threat for 50, 60 years, and it has, the only thing you could entertain yourself with 100 years ago was a book, and now there's much more competition for that industry.
I think,
and now it's even films now. I find under eggs. I struggle to watch films these days because you've got a series that's snappier, and sitting through 2.5 hours of something is kind of versus a TikTok video or a half an hour Netflix episode is kind of.
But my point is that publishers only publish books by celebrities because that's all people read. I think we are as a society, we're losing the benefits of reading. Yeah, and I want that to come back. And I think sort of reducing the impact of social media willingly, in a way that we've chosen to manage alcohol willingly, so it doesn't destroy us, would be a good thing. And the only other thing, what happened in 10 years' time, is that West Indies compete in Test cricket again in the way that they haven't done in the last 10 years. So that's why.
I could toast to both those things for sure. I mean, that quantification of value that we see, I think, has impacted the reading industry or the publishing industry for sure. I mean, there's some statistics that leaked out from publishing houses that books, once they reach page 238, sales drop off by 8% and then incrementally drop off faster. So all books are now being governed by the algorithm, which and to your point, you've got to be a celebrity to kind of get a chance of being published
or read.
And so it's a distribution problem, and our ability to sit with our own thoughts and process them through the written word, or even, it goes back to the whole Antarctic thing, being able to be alone with yourselves and each other rather than kind of hyper-connected.
Yeah, and I think to also understand the beauty of what's out, the written, what's there. Yeah. There's so much that you can learn from, and that can influence the way you conduct your life. Maybe you can through TikTok too.
Yeah. But how did you find your mental state after 11 days in, was there a clarity that last, I mean, maybe it's still there. Did you have a period where you were like, wow, I can really sort of, the noise is gone?
I think, I did think that. I think it was, we felt very euphoric, I think, and on top of the world. And, it's very life affirming. Yeah. And I think, Antarctica is it's easier to get to now. I mean, it's expensive and difficult, but people should give it a go.
And the act of kind of being alone with your thoughts for 11 days would have, I guess, did you see the world in a different way when you came back, or did you find yourself kind of mean reverting?
No, you mean revert within a matter of seconds, I'd say.
Yeah.
Once you're through Heathrow.
So it's almost, you start swearing at the taxi driver.
Exactly, you're paying the car parking bill,
Of course,
it doesn't last.
So there has to be almost a kind of continuous discipline to sort of force yourself into these. Well, it doesn't have to be the Antarctic, but something.
I think those of us that are lucky enough to have had those opportunities value them very highly. I think everyone should try and find their Antarctic, whatever it is, and try and cross it, because that's more important in life than lots of things.
Well, like I opened with, I think we need this now more than ever for reasons we're all aware of, and whether it's a European decline problem or a kind of developed world loss of belief in ourselves and our futures and a loss of ambition, I don't know. We're all feeling it. We're all sensing it around us, and we hopefully things like this and the things that you followed through will help and do their little bit to kind of help course correct or revivify, bring a spirit of adventure back. So thank you very much for sparing the time. It's been quite moving. So I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
This has been Meeting People. I've been your host, Amal Pandya. This is a podcast produced by Matt Cooper with music composed by Loverman.